Hey everybody, it's good to see you guys. Um, this is a really weird semester for me from a teaching perspective because the last time I was at Friday Fellowship speaking, I think was the first fellowship meeting of the semester. We've had so many guest speakers and our own folks since then, and that's been really cool. Um, and now this is our last opportunity this semester where I can speak before our senior meeting next week. And because of that, I really haven't had a chance to speak to the many just intense things happening around us in the world right now that I feel like it's weird that we haven't at all processed it. We're not going to have a lot of processing time, but I want to at least acknowledge some of what's happening out there and speak to it in my talk tonight. So first thing I just want to acknowledge is the passing of Pope Francis this last week, and our sympathies are with our Catholic siblings in Christ. Francis was the first Latin American pope. He was the first Jesuit pope. He was the first pope to choose the name Francis after St. Francis Assisi, who famously rejected his family's wealth and took a vow of poverty and serving the poor. And Pope Francis exemplified that in his life before becoming pope and then afterward. He was not perfect, but he exemplified many of the best Christian values. He was a vocal opponent of war and oppression. He spoke against rising authoritarianism and right-wing populist movements in the world. He advocated for immigrants and for climate action. And despite leading a very traditional institution, he surprised many of us by his warm and non-judgmental tone toward LGBTQ people. The Pope is pretty much the most influential non-politician in the world. And so I think we wait with a bit of uncertainty to see who's going to come in to be the next pope and whether they're going to build on his legacy or pull back in a different direction. I think that voice could be really important right now in the world. Quite a few other things to feel uncertain about these days. The tariffs and other economic decisions have completely upended the global economy and our national economy. They're going to have long-term effects. Some of you are worried about the job market. It's going to affect the job market. It's already affected one of my jobs, so I have a few irons in the fire here, and one of them is I work with my father-in-law. We work with local electronics manufacturers, and we get components manufactured for them in China and shipped over here, and that's pretty much dead as long as the tariffs stay as high as they are. So I'm like, oh, maybe that business is over, or maybe not. We have no idea. So it's just an uncertain time. There's a disturbing level of political persecution right now, with the government pressuring law firms, media outlets, universities, all these places to adhere to a right-wing agenda or face actual consequences for their businesses and possibly investigations and who knows what else. And of course, maybe most disturbingly, there's been violence and hostility toward immigrants, including the illegal rendition to a Salvadoran gulag without due process of many immigrants, many of whom were in the system legally and processing through the system legally. It is a scary authoritarian tactic. It violates human rights and the US Constitution. And it is designed to cause fear and uncertainty. So if you're feeling fear and uncertainty around those things, that is 100% the point of those measures. It's a lot like the family separation policy at the border that happened during Trump's first term. It's designed to scare the heck out of everybody. The cruelty, as they say, is the point. We have many friends and loved ones who are fleeing the country right now or thinking that they should or uncertain what to do. And so I just want to recognize that this is a reality. This is some serious authoritarian stuff. It's real. It matters. If you feel overwhelmed, I feel overwhelmed. That's 100% what they're trying to do. The more overwhelmed we feel, the less likely people are to stand up and oppose or do anything about it. So I just want to acknowledge that is the reality. And there's a little bit of a bubble on campus, but not enough of one. So I'm sure probably a lot of the time you're not thinking about that. You're focused on the stuff you have to do here, but then it's in the back of the mind, and then you read something and it's out again. And it's just, we're all living in this soup right now. It's real. Even if all that weren't happening, you all are in this period of life that is full of uncertainty and change and transition anyway. I think things would be probably on your mind, even if everything out there, it never is like this, but if everything out there felt perfectly fine, there would still be a lot of anguish and frustration and questioning and am I doing the right thing? So before I go any further in my talk, I want to give you all a chance to touch, like get in touch with what's happening inside you a little bit, I'd like you to turn and share with a neighbor what is one area of concern or uncertainty that has been affecting you lately. There'll be some more time to talk in a little bit. I'm going to ask follow-up questions to that question, so hold that in mind, whatever you shared or whatever you were about to share, and we'll come back to it. My talk tonight is called Life as a Journey of Change and Disruption. I first wrote a version of this talk and gave it for CCF in March of 2020. Only then it was called Leaving School Early. We found out with just days to spare that everyone was being sent home basically for COVID, and we pulled together an emergency fellowship meeting so we could say goodbye to each other and goodbye to the seniors that we weren't going to see again. And I spoke on a similar message. We had no idea what would happen next or how long we'd be away. It was truly a time of disruption and change. And I think it says something about the moment that we're in now, that when I was trying to think of what to say, this talk jumped out at me. Like, oh yeah, the talk I gave before we all went home for COVID feels like a good talk to give at this season. Also, it turns out it's the same president. Who would have guessed? Tonight, I'm going to argue that there is a path through times like these where we can do more than just survive, but we can grow, thrive, and contribute more healing to the world. And I think it comes through this framing of journey. The Bible is a book of journeys. The people of Israel began as a journey. In Genesis 12, God tells Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing." But God tells this guy Abram to leave everything he's ever known in a time when your connection to family was necessary for survival. They didn't really have a strong state or local police or anything like that. It was like these family units, that extended family units that basically functioned as your society and your safety net. And God tells Abram, go off. I'm going to start not just a new kin group with you or a new household, but a new nation with you. And somehow that I'm not going to explain to you right now, I'm going to use you to bring blessing to the whole world. It's the first of many journeys in the Hebrew Bible, which we could go through lots of things. Exodus, there's many more that come to mind. In the New Testament, journey becomes one of the ways that Jesus' ministry is framed. In the Gospel of Luke, it keeps getting repeated that Jesus is on the way to Jerusalem, on the way at every stage of his ministry. So there's a sense of inexorable movement towards this ultimate thing that is going to happen in Jerusalem. In Acts, we read about the early Christians and their missionary journeys, the journeys of Paul and other Christians to spread the news about Jesus throughout the Roman Empire. Faith is a journey. Following Jesus is a journey. Life is a journey. Journeys are not always pleasant. Some journeys start because of crises, because of events that we did not want, and they push us into places we never planned to go. Last semester, a number of us studied the book of Ruth, and it's a story about how Naomi and her family are driven by famine out of their homeland in Bethlehem and have to go live in a neighboring country that does not get along that well, actually, with Israel, called Moab, and build their lives there. And then she ends up having to do another journey later back, also because of tragedy. Two journeys, both prompted by things she would not have wanted. It's an immigrant story. So many of our families or people we know came to the U.S. not because they were excited to be here, although maybe some of them were, but usually because there was a lack of something or some kind of pressure at home that made it look like this. It would be better to go to a new place where you don't know many people than stay where you are. CCF's journey started like this. Some of you have heard bits of the story before, but I want to tell you a more complete version of kind of how CCF came to be. So this group used to be part of a national evangelical organization on over 700 campuses called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, or IV for short. It has nothing to do with sports, it's just the name. It's a British thing. The Claremont colleges had two InterVarsity chapters. There was us. We were Pomona Pitzer Christian Fellowship, And there was another chapter serving the other 3 undergrad schools called 3CIV. Lorraine started staffing, we were both involved in InterVarsity as students, and then Lorraine started staffing this group in the year 2000, and I joined her in 2003. It's an old story, y'all. For the next 12 years, we built this ministry together. And it was pretty cool. It was thriving. There was a lot of good things going on. It was an exciting thing to be part of. Lorraine and I became respected leaders and mentors in the broader InterVarsity community, getting invited to mentor other staff and speak on other campuses and that sort of thing. But in the summer of 2015, we began a learning project, Lorraine and I, that would change all of that, although we didn't know it when we started. We started learning more about Christianity and queerness. We were not trying to change our minds from the traditional perspective that we held. In fact, when I started this learning journey, I fully thought to be completely reinforced in everything I already believed. But students were questioning us more and more about the Christian stance on the issue. We felt like some students were coming to us because they were gay, or they were coming out and they were asking for advice, and we were giving them advice out of our traditional perspective. And with all these things going on, it started to feel like we really better know our stuff on this and be sure we're right and have a depth, like if we're going to have all these conversations. And so we started that learning process. But after a year of learning, to our surprise, our perspective completely changed to the queer-affirming, progressive perspective. If you want to know more about how that happened, I gave a whole talk on that while we were in COVID, so it's me talking into a computer screen. I have a QR code for it right here. If you want, you can get that if you want to listen to it later. You're always welcome to talk to me too. By the way, if anybody scans that, it does link straight to the YouTube video, so it might just start playing the video on your phone. Fair warning. I won't be offended. So at the same time we were on this learning journey, our national organization was also in a process around this issue, looking to bring all the staff in alignment on a traditional perspective. So we knew something was coming from our organization. It just so happened that the two processes converged 1 year after we started this learning thing in August of 2016, not 2026, where InterVarsity rolled out a policy. They sent out a 20-page PDF of a theological essay outlining a traditional ethic around sexual and gender issues. And they required that all staff who did not believe it would have to give notice and essentially fire themselves 3 months later on November 11th. By the way, it was that paper that was actually the final thing for me that made me realize I was queer affirming. I'd gotten all the way around to like, I know I'm not traditional anymore. I just don't know what I believe. And then I read the paper and I'm like, oh, I know I don't believe this. Which also meant, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to us? It was a total shock. Even to our colleagues who still had a more traditional perspective, it was surprising. It was a shock. No one was expecting something so strict and so quick to come out. I figured even if there was something, it would be like a long, like we were known, right? We were respected. There would be this process of like, yeah, you're running a ministry. Why don't you wind this thing down out like over time and we'll do a handoff? No, it was just everyone off. Suddenly in 3 months, both Lorraine and me would have to find new jobs. We had a young daughter and a mortgage to pay. We had no other ideas of what we wanted to do. We didn't want to do anything else because we loved what we were doing. We felt called to what we were doing. And not just broadly in campus ministry, but specifically here because of what was being built in this place. The idea of losing it was scary and it was sad. And not only that, but the idea that it would probably crumble in some way because there was no way there was going to be other people to come in and take it over. And a lot of students would be angry that we were fired. And the thing we had built would likely not be the same thing in very long. So we started working to get the policy changed as that countdown to November 11th just sort of ticked in the background. 3 months to try to get them to change this policy or at least delay the implementation or something. We found other staff who opposed the policy, many of whom were going to also have to exit, and we worked with them. We pressed our supervisors and their supervisors. We even pressed the InterVarsity president. We were trying to save our jobs, but we were also trying to protect the people who would be hurt, yet again, by another big announcement of Christian exclusion. We were trying to save the ministry of InterVarsity, which we felt would be badly hurt if this news got out on environments like college campuses. The news did get out. Some staff leaked the internal announcement to Time magazine, which went national with the story, and it was news enough that people noticed and were talking about it. I've said several times, I think Donald Trump saved InterVarsity because when he got elected, it was such a shock to everybody that the whole InterVarsity scandal just dropped out of all the news. But until that point, it was a live news story, at least in the Christian world. Claremont students who were not in the fellowship were aware that InterVarsity was doing this thing and starting to talk about it. In fact, there began to be a movement among the student government and coordinating with other student governments to get InterVarsity kicked off of the colleges as a homophobic organization. Many of our students, as they found out, also began fighting the policy. Some of them started a national petition among InterVarsity chapters. One student wrote an article for the Huffington Post. Despite all of this, InterVarsity refused to budge or to delay the November 11th deadline. And so eventually the students took action and they voted. I had to go back and look at my journals. They voted 46-3 to disaffiliate the club from InterVarsity. It wasn't because 46 people were progressive on the issue and 3 weren't. I think there was a lot more of a spectrum and a lot more people who were traditional. But they didn't like what was happening. They didn't want to lose us as staff. And they did not want to have to defend a policy that they disagreed with to the student governments as the student governments were coming to kick them off campus. So the Pomona-Pitzer Christian Fellowship left InterVarsity, and we left InterVarsity, and we all left together. As far as we know, we're the only InterVarsity chapter in the nation where the students all left and the staff all left at the same time, and thus were able to become something new. Our sister chapter, 3CIV, stayed with InterVarsity. They were temporarily kicked off campus at Scripps. They had to defend their affiliation with InterVarsity at a contentious budget hearing at CMC. A number of students left 3CIV to join our group, so we changed our name to Claremont Christian Fellowship from Pomona-Pitzer Christian Fellowship. 3CIV became 5CIV as the only InterVarsity chapter in Claremont. A few more conservative students left our group soon after this. It was pretty traumatic, actually, especially for the younger students. Imagine being a somewhat conservative freshman, and that you come into the fellowship, and we're going through this crisis, and people are voting, should we stay or not with this organization, and all this stuff. A few of the more conservative students left and became some of the founding leaders of First Love, which started around this time period too. That's how our journey as CCF began. It didn't come from a pre-planned vision. It was a solution we threw together on the fly in the midst of a crisis, trying to figure things out as we went. In the midst of a stressful, painful, and uncertain time. Somehow out of that, it became somewhere in there a beautiful journey. We started becoming a new thing that we never even envisioned. When we left, we were literally like, we're just going to be the same thing we were before, except we're gonna have much more tolerance for queer folks in the community, right? But we started becoming something new that we did not envision. Leaving that space gave us room to question some of the values and practices that we never had room to question before. We no longer had to report the number of students we'd converted each year. We could jettison a top-down culture where we were expected as staff to be the authorities on everything and you as students to learn and just absorb from us. And we could take more of a learning from each other posture. It immediately made us a more welcoming space for queer students when people found out why we had left. It put us on a path toward being a highly inclusive community that could deal honestly with questions about faith and learn from each other. So there's a more complete story. It's obviously from my perspective. You might get something different from someone else if you asked. But let me put it back to you. Just because this is our community, what do you think about this as sort of how this community started, especially if this is a new story to you? What stands out to you about the story of CCF? And what questions does it raise for you about this history or about Christianity or communities in general? Go ahead and share with each other that. What comes out of this thing, the thing I want to say is that, stuff just comes at us, right? Life really is a journey of change and disruption. And because of that, I just want to give you guys a few short pieces of travel advice for the journey. This is not stuff where it's me having all the answers. This is some advice through our experience and other experiences we've had over time. So let me just say a few things. The first piece of advice is to expect change and disruption. They're part of the experience. If you're not experiencing some change and disruption, you're not on a journey, right? You're staying put in a comfortable place. Disruption is often hard and uncomfortable. The Bible's most well-known psalm is one about being on a journey with God, framed as sheep being led by a shepherd. The first four verses of it read, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." It's just a beautiful image of how like a sheep just trusts the shepherd and follows the shepherd to places of rest and food and restoration, and then through dangerous places and scary places for a sheep to new places where there's food and restoration. There are going to be good moments and seasons where we find ourselves in green grass by still waters, and there are going to be seasons of dark, scary valleys. 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this time, whatever things are freaking you out right now, your life stage, the current events, whatever it is, whatever questions are bothering you. 10 years from now, you'll look back and you'll wish you could tell yourself, yeah, that was hard. You're going to be okay. You'll figure it out. And you don't even know yet about all these cool opportunities and moments and relationships that were waiting for you in the journey. When we're in the dark valley, everything looks scary. We can't see our way through to the good at the end. But from the perspective of the pasture on the other side, we can look back and see, oh yeah, that's how we needed to go to get where we are. It doesn't make those things easier. It doesn't justify the really terrible things that happens. But it's useful to know that God was in it with us and bringing us through to something new. In one of my all-time favorite journey stories, Bilbo Baggins tells his nephew Frodo, he says, "It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to." This is being told at the end of The Lord of the Rings, when Bilbo says these things to Frodo. And out of context, wait, is it the end or is it the beginning and after The Hobbit? I think it's the end. Anyway, out of context, it sounds like a scary warning, right? Watch out when you go out. You could be swept away to anywhere. And at the beginning of Bilbo's journeys, at the beginning of The Hobbit, that's how it felt to him. It felt scary and threatening. He didn't know where he was going. But by the time he's giving Frodo this advice, we, the reader, know that he's lived this life of adventures and found all this life and reward and meaning in those things. He's been transformed by them. And so when he says these words, we know they mean something completely different. We know he means it's good. There's something good in being swept away. Are we willing to go through some of these hard things, these challenging things, with that knowledge that they're taking us to some new transformation? We're coming out of this different, but God can bring beauty out of this thing, just like God brought beauty out of one of the biggest crises in my life through being kicked out of InterVarsity when we were. The second piece of travel advice is this: to travel with purpose. Again, it's not really a journey if you're not traveling with some purpose. You're really just sort of drifting around, right? So much college stress comes from not knowing what path to choose. Or if we do know if we do have a path, not knowing if it's the right one. Or maybe we do think it's the right one, but we're worried we might not make it. What if I fail this or that and I don't get there? And then what will happen to me? As many of you know, I came into college with a plan to be a doctor. I had a clear map for my life that started in high school and continued through clear courses you take in college on a clear track to having a secure career. And I think, I didn't know at the time, I know it now, that security means something to me. I like the path to be laid out straight. So when I dropped out of pre-med, second semester, freshman year, I had no map. I had not been without a map since freshman year of high school, I think. It was scary. And no matter how much I worried, no post-college job or direction seemed right. Literally, by the time I was nearing graduation, I did not know what was going to happen to me after I graduated. And the fear was mounting. I had some good people to consult with, good friends, and they helped me. And what I realized was, even though I did not know where I was going, I knew the kind of life I wanted to live. And so I acted out of knowing the kind of life I wanted to live and started taking one step at a time through that direction. First, I took a step of living with some friends for a year in Los Angeles, people I knew I wanted to live with who could support me, where I just got some jobs and I could figure out what was next. From there, I decided on doing a 2-year urban ministry internship in the city of Pomona with a Christian organization. That experience confirmed that I liked ministry and would love to do that with my life, but that my heart and my gifts, I liked the teaching and all that, but they were with older students than the ones I was working with, which led to me wanting to come back into ministry and eventually joining Lorraine on staff, on campus staff, which I have loved ever since. I feel like I'm where I was meant to be all along. I had no idea once I lost my map that was waiting for me out there. But sometimes the best thing we can do is just figure that thing out. What kind of life do I want to live? And take the next step in that direction. And by the way, I think this is useful for us for living boldly in times like we're in right now, where the government is threatening people who oppose it with investigations and loss of funding and career impacting losses of access to resources and all these things. If our value and our hope and everything is in the path that we have laid out, people can take that from us. Or they can use the threat of taking that path from us to manipulate us against our conscience and our values and all kinds of things. If that path requires a certain job track or certain this or that, that's not wrong to have that path in mind. But if we're holding on to that thing, culture will mess with us, right? Our values will get skewed over time. But if our primary is, what is the kind of life I want to live? If that's the thing I'm holding on to, I can start moving in a direction, and if that starts to get taken away from me, I know, if I'm facing that choice, I know my priority is the kind of life I want to live. If they're going to take that path away from me, fine. I'm going to keep living the kind of life, be the kind of person I want to be. Maybe that path will go away, and I'm once again walking through a dark valley with no idea where it goes. The good news is I'm walking with the Good Shepherd who's by my side, and I'm holding to a purpose that feels right to me. We can lean into God and God's justice, God's rightness, God's rest, and trust God to lead us in right paths, even if we don't know what those are going to be. This brings me to my final bit of advice. We need to travel with companions. God is one of them. God's a big one. But not just God, also other people. When Jesus called each disciple to follow him, he didn't call them into an individual faith experience. You and me, we're going through this all the way, just by ourselves. He called them to be part of a community that was journeying together. When he sent them out ahead of him to the towns he was going to minister to, he sent them in pairs. Why did he send them in pairs? They could have covered more towns if they'd gone individually, right? Maybe it would have been better for their faith if they'd had to go by themselves and trust God. Maybe they would have developed all the skills if they'd been out there doing it by themselves. We're all a bunch of go-getters. I'll do it by myself, right? He sent them in pairs because we need people. God knows we're social beings. We do better in community than on our own. Scientific research shows us this is true on a physiological level. Social connections help people manage blood sugar levels, improve cancer survival, decrease depressive symptoms. Talking to another person about the daily stresses in your life lowers the level of the stress hormone cortisol in your bloodstream. Talking to people is literally how your body chills you out naturally. We need We need people to help us navigate the stresses, challenges, uncertainties of life, both big picture and also just the daily things, to come home and rant about like what happened when you were driving home from work or whatever. I am so grateful that Lorraine and I had each other through that 2016 experience, because I know there were staff who were the only person on their team who were like going to have to fire themselves and had to do that journey somewhat alone. And, man, we had so many conversations, took walks, just like expressing what was going on for us, how we felt, what on earth we were going to do next. Our church pastors and fellow church members were super supportive of us in that journey. And we especially had our students who helped us make the decision, who left with us, and then who helped us shape what CCF came to be. This was not just a brainchild of Chris and Lorraine. We built this thing together and continued to do that through more generations of students who came after. None of this stuff made that season easy. None of it made suffering go away. None of it made it less bad, but it made all the difference in how we experienced that season and what came out of it. This is why it's so important to be in communities like this one or other ones that mean something to you, and to put in the time to build meaningful relationships in these spaces. We need people with whom we can share our roses, buds, and thorns, and who will listen to us. For those of us who are transitioning into different jobs, different places off campus, maybe around the country, or thinking about that for your future, you start thinking about this now if you're younger, it's worth prioritizing, thinking about what are my relationships going to be in my support network when I go to this place. Sometimes we can't do anything about it, and the best we can do is I will keep my good friends on Zoom. We'll set a weekly time to meet, and I'll try to make new relationships. But a lot of times we have choices about who to live with, about 2 different cities we could live in. What if we prioritize people and do things together with other people as much as possible? What if once we get to these places, we prioritize the work it will take to try to hunt down a community that feels right for us, even if it means going to like 15 churches on Sunday mornings before you find one that feels like good, or like joining every interest group you can think of out there, your CrossFit and like book clubs, until you find a place where you meet some people you like. It's worth the effort. I'm going to wrap this up. That was my traveling advice for you all. And I want to ask you to come back to one final conversation with each other. These are the 3 things I talked about with my advice, and also the story of CCF. Expect change and disruption, travel with purpose, travel with companions. I want to ask you to discuss these 2 questions. First, how can you travel with purpose, i.e., let the kind of life you want to live help you navigate the uncertainties and challenges facing you now? And secondly, how can you travel with companions? For example, getting help from or developing supportive relationships. Go ahead and talk to each other, and then I'll wrap this up.